At dinner, his mother snatched Zara's black card from the table, cut it in half, then dropped the pieces into a glass of red wine. "A poor girl should learn her place," she laughed. His mistress whispered something to him that made him laugh. Zara said nothing. Minutes later, when the bill came, his own platinum card was declined. He tried again. Declined. Then the waiter looked at Zara and suddenly stopped apologizing and turned pale. "You cannot even cover a dinner?" his mother said, "and you married her?" "Sir, I'm sorry, the card will not go through." "Ma'am, forgive me, I didn't know it was you." His name was Tony Reed. That night, in a steakhouse with white cloth on the tables, he watched his mother cut his wife's card in half and drown it in wine, and he did not lift a finger. The woman beside him, Simone, in a red dress, laughed behind her hand. His mother, Marissa, dabbed her mouth like she had done a kindness, and Zara sat in the middle of it, one hand rising to the thin chain at her collar, where a small gold ring hung, a ring too little to fit her hand, the only thing her mother ever left her. He had no idea the woman he let them laugh at kept a whole life he had never once bothered to look at. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Tony had not always been this man. Six back, he was a young man on a car lot, and he loved Zara Monroe the way you love clean water. She was the church secretary who typed the bulletins and stayed late to count the offering. He liked that she was steady. She liked that he laughed easy. They married in that same church, and Miss Ophelia cried in the front row like Zara was her own blood. For 3 years, he was good to her. He brought her coffee the way she liked it. He held her hand in the pew. When his mother made her little remarks, he waved them off. Then the dealership made him a floor manager, the money got better, and something in him began to shift. His mother fed it. Marissa Reed had opinions and a soft, patient way of planting them. "You could have married up, Tony, a man in your position," she would set it down gentle on Sunday dinner, like sugar and tea. "A church typist, what does she really bring to your name?" At first he defended his wife, then a little less, then he only looked at his plate. Because a man's ear bends toward the voice that flatters him, and Marissa's voice told him he was rising and Zara was the weight around his ankle. Tony had always been afraid, deep down, that he was ordinary. His mother offered him a story where the problem was not him, it was Zara, and he took it because it was easier to carry than the truth. Then Simone arrived, and she made the story feel like a reward. Zara watched her husband leave her one Sunday at a time before he ever packed a bag. She could have stopped it with a single sentence. She never said it. Because of what Tony thought he knew about his wife and how wrong it was. He believed Zara had a little clerical job, some typing, some sewing, the way her mother used to. She left early most mornings and came home tired, and he never asked where she went because he had already decided the answer was nothing worth knowing. He never drove down Alden Street. He never read the green sign on the low brick building there. If he ever pulled the papers on Heritage Community Bank, he would have found it held by a quiet company called Heritage Holdings, and that Heritage Holdings had one owner and one chairman, and the both were the same woman, his wife. Zara Monroe owned Heritage. She had built it, and she still ran it, under her maiden name. She kept it that way on purpose. Her face was in none of the bank's marketing. She did the work in the back offices and let a manager stand for the photos. She never wanted a man to court a bank and call it loving her. So Monroe stayed folded away from her marriage, and the longer she stayed quiet, the harder it became to ever speak. She had built that bank out of a wound. When Zara was 9, her mother, Ruth Ann Monroe, cleaned houses on the east side and saved coins in a coffee can. When she had enough, she walked into a bank downtown to borrow the rest for a home of her own. A man looked at her cracked hands and told her no. Not "no, here is how," just "no." Ruth Ann came home and did not cry in front of her girl. She took the ring off her own finger, pressed it into Zara's small palm, and said, "Baby, own something one day. Own something they cannot cut in half and laugh at." Ruth Ann died before Zara turned 12. The ring was already too small for her. Zara wore it on a chain and kept the coffee can on a shelf where she could see it. By 30, she had built the thing her mother was refused. Heritage said yes to the people downtown said no to. Zara ran it careful and quiet, and she gave the money her mother never got to the women who came in with the same cracked hands. The first hint came in a kitchen. At Marissa's Sunday table, Simone had begun to appear. A family friend, Marissa called her. That evening, Marissa set the good plate in front of Simone and slid the chipped one to Zara, and Tony watched it happen and said nothing. Afterward, drying dishes, Miss Ophelia leaned close. The old woman had kept the books for half the businesses on that block for 40 years, the funeral home included. Ophelia said quietly, "You know Nathaniel Reed near lost this whole place once, debt up to the roof. Then one day the note was paid, clean, no name on it." She let that sit. "I filed the paperwork myself, child. I am the only one who ever saw who paid it, and I know an angel when I meet one." She said no more and went back to the dishes. Zara held her breath and kept drying, because she had signed that release herself years before she ever met Tony, back when Heritage quietly saved 3 families on that block. She never knew until now that one of them was his. The second hint came in the car. Tony was always on his phone. One evening, Zara came in and heard him on speaker before he knew she was there. "The dealership's expanding. My whole promotion rides on the new location, but the financing's stuck at some neighborhood outfit, Heritage, over on Alden. My future is sitting in the hands of a little bank I have never even walked into." Zara stood in the doorway with her keys still in her hand. Her future was sitting in her hands. He simply could not see the hands for the wife. She set her keys down slowly and swallowed the thing rising in her throat. Something behind her eyes had grown tired of hiding. Then Tiara came into the bank. She was 22, a baby on her hip, and she came in shaking, certain she would hear no, because she heard no everywhere. Her hands were cracked, the same as Ruth Ann's. Zara sat with her herself and approved the loan for the small daycare the girl had been dreaming about, and when Tiara started to cry, Zara held her hand across the desk and heard her own mother in the room. She drove home that evening and looked at Tony laughing at his phone across the dinner table, and she thought, calm and clear, he has no idea who he married, and one day, soon, he will. Simone was not a fool, and she was not evil for its own sake. She was drowning. She owed money, real money, to men who did not take apologies, and her time was almost gone. She had come around the Reeds because funeral money looked easy, but when she heard Tony say his promotion rode on Heritage, she got curious about the bank. She started asking quiet questions. Who owned it? Who signed the big loans? One Tuesday, she followed Zara out of restlessness and watched the churchwoman walk into the brick building on Alden while the tellers straightened their backs as she passed. Simone did not understand what she was looking at. She thought perhaps Zara was somebody important's favorite, close to money without being money. But she smelled a way out, and she made a plan. She would push the family to break Zara in public and clear her out of the marriage. Then, with Tony hers and Zara humiliated, she would trade whatever she had learned about Heritage for the cash she needed before her deadline. She decided the dinner would be the beginning of it. She did not know she had misread the whole table. Marissa made her own move that same week. She came to Zara's house while Tony was at work, sat in the living room, and folded her hands. "Sweetheart, Tony has outgrown this. A clean break is kinder." Her eyes dropped to the chain at Zara's throat. "And that little ring. Family keepsakes should stay with family. Let me hold it for you." Zara's hand closed over the ring. "This was my mother's." "And you were barely ever family," Marissa said, still smiling. "Don't make it ugly." Zara did not cry. She walked Marissa to the door and closed it softly. Then she stood in the hall a long time with the ring pressed into her palm, hearing her mother's voice. "Own something they cannot cut in half and laugh at." Something in her settled that afternoon. She was not going to wait for Tony to become the man she married. She was not going to plan any revenge either. She was simply finished carrying a man who had let his mother reach for her dead mother's ring. She was done. She just had not picked the moment yet. Marissa picked it for her. The steakhouse was Marissa's idea, a celebration of Tony's promotion, all but sealed. She wanted Simone there and Zara there side by side so the whole room could see the difference between them. So Zara went. You know how it began. Marissa snatched up Zara's black card, took the shears from her purse like she had planned it, and cut the card clean in half, then dropped both halves into a glass of red wine and watched the color close over them. "A poor girl should learn her place," she laughed. Simone laughed behind her hand. Tony laughed a half-second before either of them, the way he always did, to be sure he stood on the winning side. Zara looked at the wine, at the two pieces of plastic sinking in the dark red. Her hand came up to the chain at her throat, and she held the ring, and she breathed once, slowly, and she did not give them her tears. Under the table, on her phone, she opened one account and removed one authorized user. It took 4 seconds. Then she folded her hands in her lap and waited. The bill came. Tony, easy and loud, laid down his platinum card. The waiters, a young man named Curtis, whose mother banked at Heritage, who had walked past the chairman's photograph in that lobby 100 times, ran it and frowned. "Sir, I'm sorry, it won't go through." Tony laughed. "Run it again." Declined. The table went quiet. Marissa's smile thinned. Curtis picked up the card to check the name, then looked from the card to the woman sitting so still in the middle of them, and the blood drained out of his face. "Ma'am, Miss Monroe, forgive me, I didn't know it was you." Silence. "Miss who? Her name is Reed." Zara stood and smoothed her plain dress. She laid 2 20s on the cloth for the boy's trouble. "Your card was tied to my account, Tony. It always was. I closed the access a few minutes ago," she said quietly. "The dealership loan is yours. I will not touch that, but I am finished carrying the rest." She walked out into the parking lot alone, and not one of them yet understood the size of what had just left the room. The next 4 days did the understanding for them. The first day, Tony called Heritage to fix the mistake. He sat on hold with the paperwork in his lap, tapping his foot, and a polite voice finally told him the account was private and that he was no longer an authorized user. He asked to speak to the account holder. The voice said the account holder had removed him. He hung up and stared at the wall. The second day, at the dealership, his manager clapped his shoulder and said the expansion was on track, the financing was solid, Heritage had come through. Tony smiled and shook his hand and felt the floor tilt under him. Heritage. Again, he'd heard that word from his own mouth on the phone to Simone, and now it was closing around him from 2 directions. The third day, he couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, he sat up in bed and typed the name into his phone. Monroe Holdings, owner of record, Heritage Community Bank. He read it 4 times. He searched the officers of the company. He found a chairman he had never once heard named inside his own house. He set the phone down, then he picked it up again and searched Zara's maiden name, the name on their marriage license, the name he had not thought about in years. Monroe. He remembered her leaving early every single morning, the days she came home tired and quiet, the way she never explained and the way he never asked. He remembered 100 small doors she had left open that he never once walked through because he had already decided there was nothing behind them. The fourth day, he stood in front of the bathroom mirror and said it out loud, slow, like a man watching the ground open. Heritage, Alden Street, Monroe, Zara Monroe. He sat down on the edge of the tub and put his head in his hands. Heritage Community Bank turned 10 that Saturday, and the neighborhood threw the celebration in the church fellowship hall because that is who the bank belonged to. The Reeds came because Reed and Sons banked there, and Marissa never missed a plate. Tony came because he had spent 4 days working up the nerve. Simone came because she was still holding her secret, still waiting for the moment to sell it. The deacon stepped to the microphone. "Family, for 10 years, one woman said yes to us when the world kept saying no. She kept it quiet as long as she could. Tonight, we will not let her hide. Please stand for the founder and owner of Heritage Community Bank, one of our own, Miss Zara Monroe." The whole room rose to its feet. Tony came halfway out of his chair and could not finish standing, caught between up and down, exactly the man he was. Zara walked the center aisle in a plain blue dress, and the little ring on its chain caught the light. Odell from the hair shop was crying. Tiara lifted her baby high to see. Every hand in that hall was clapping. Zara reached the microphone and looked out at the people who had never once made her feel small. Then she found the table where the Reeds sat. "My mother cleaned houses," she said, and the room went still to hear her. "She saved coins in a can. When she asked a bank for a little help to buy a home, a man looked at her hands and told her no. She lifted the chain and the ring turned in the light. She gave me this. It never fit me. I built this place so that no woman with cracked hands ever hears that no again." She did not raise her voice. Her calm filled the room more than any shout could. "Some of you sat at a nice dinner this week and cut a card in half and laughed about a poor girl learning her place." She let the words rest. "I learned my place a long time ago. It is right here with the people who never needed me to be rich to think I was worth a seat." Marissa stared down at her hands, and her face was gray. Then Miss Ophelia rose with her cane, took the microphone, and turned not to Zara, but to Marissa. "Marissa Reed, 20 years you have thanked God for the angel that saved Reed and Sons, the note nobody could pay, the miracle with no name on it. I filed those papers, so I am the only living soul who ever knew the name, and I have carried it all this time, waiting for the Lord to tell me when." She lifted one finger and pointed down the row at Zara. "There is your angel, before she married your boy, before you handed her a chipped plate. She paid your family's debt and never asked for a word of thanks." The hall gasped. Tony made a sound like the wind had been knocked out of him. "The girl you tried to take a dead woman's ring from," Ophelia said, her voice cracking, "is the reason you still have a business to leave your son." Marissa began to cry into both hands, the kind of crying that has no dignity left in it. Tony turned to his wife, and every clue of the last 6 years arrived at once. The early mornings, the tiredness, the word heritage, the name Monroe, and landed all together. He saw finally and completely exactly what he had thrown into a glass of wine. And Simone, thinking the room had turned in a way she could ride, stood and crossed toward Zara with a bright, hungry smile. Miss Monroe, I always knew you were special. Tony never deserved you. You and we understand each other. I could tell you things about him. Simone. Just the name. Quiet. Simone stopped. Heritage's compliance team flagged you weeks ago. They noticed someone asking questions about who owned the bank, a name that came back tied to the Reeds and to a debt with a hard deadline. They brought it to me. She tilted her head almost gently. So I know what you owe and who you owe it to and how little time you have left. You came here to sell my secret to save yourself. You bet everyone has a price. You bet on the wrong woman. Simone's smile came apart in pieces. She gathered her red dress and left, her heels loud on the church floor, and the door swung shut behind her, and nobody rose to stop her. Tony found Zara afterward on the church steps in the warm dark, while the celebration went on without him. He looked 10 years older. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't. That was the whole marriage, Tony. You never knew. You never asked. You had a wife you could have known for free, and you spent 3 years wishing she were somebody else." "I'll do better. The loan, the promotion, The loan cleared this morning. Your promotion is real. I never touched either one." She stepped down a stair. "I am not your mother, Tony. I do not punish people with money." She held his eyes. "But I am not going to be small anymore so you can feel big. We're done." He reached desperate toward the chain at her throat. "The ring, please. Help me understand the ring." Zara closed her fingers over it one last time in front of him. "It never fit me," she said. "My mother had smaller hands and a bigger heart and less money than anyone at that dinner." She almost smiled. "It does not have to fit to mean everything." She walked down the steps and did not look back. Zara made no speeches after that. She kept doing what she had always done, only out loud now. She placed her mother's ring inside a small glass case by the front door of the bank, where every person who walked in would pass it, with a card beneath that read, "For Ruth Ann Monroe, who was told no, we say yes." She gave Tiara's daycare its second loan before the first was even paid off. When it opened, it was Tiara, hands healed now, her baby grown into a toddler clinging to her knee, who cut the ribbon. Zara stood at the back of the little crowd and watched her mother's dream walk on into another young woman's life, and that was the only monument she ever wanted. Marissa came to the bank one gray morning, months later. No makeup, no speeches left in her. She sat across the desk from the daughter-in-law she had tried to erase and could barely get the words out. "Thank you for my husband's business, for not letting it fall when you could have." "No," Zara said gently, "you don't deserve it, and I won't pretend you do. But my mother did not raise me to keep score." She slid a cup of coffee across the desk. "Reed and Sons is safe. It always was. Go home, Miss Marissa." She saw Tony only once more, from across the street, a big man in a good suit, outside the dealership, standing in the life he had chosen. He lifted his hand. She nodded once and turned the corner. That evening Zara locked the bank herself, the way she liked it. She stopped at the glass case by the door, at the little ring that never fit anyone, and pressed 2 fingers to the glass. "We said yes, Mama," she whispered. Then she turned off the light and walked home through her own neighborhood, past every yes she had ever given, a woman finally exactly the size she was. If this story moved you, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments where you were watching from, and I will see you in the next unforgettable story.